Hi loves, welcome back to the channel. Today's tutorial will be on how to make this beautiful piece by Kome. Do subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on your notification bell to returning subscribers. Thank you so much. My pattern paper, and this is the full length of my skirt. I'm working with 44 inches full length of the skirt. That's the gown pattern minus my half length. I added 2 inches extra, is 42 plus 2 inches 44 for seam allowance. So now the first thing I'm going to mark on this start line is my waistline, which is 7.5 inches. Note this is the center point of my skirt. Then I'm going to come down to 9 inches. I'm going to go ahead and insert my hip line, which is 10. Having done this, I'll go ahead and insert my seam allowance to 2 inches. Now I'm going to connect the two together. Then from here now, I'm going to so this is what I have. Then the next thing I'm going to be marking is my dart intake, my dart line. So my nipple to nipple measurements of my bust span measurement, I have 4 inches. Then from that point, I'm going to be coming down to 4.5 inches. Now the next thing I'm going to do is on this line, I'm going to be marking half an inch on both sides. Then I'm going to connect the points. The half an inch I marked is my dart intake. So this is what I have for my skirt pattern. Now the next thing I'm going to do before cutting it out, because we're going to be having a patch where our lace is going to be, like a part where we're going to be having our lacing. So from this 4 inches now, I'm going to mark it down to that point. Guys, I'm going to be working with this pattern paper now. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be working with this my bust span measurement, which is 4 inches down to the bottom part of my skirt. So I'm going to be marking it. So this is how it's going to be. This part now is where my lacing is going to be. This is part where I'm going to have my lace. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. At this point now, I've gone ahead to place my pattern paper on my fabric. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and cut it out. So I'll be starting from the down this time around. So this is for my front piece. We'll be using this to cut out for our back. So the next thing I did here was to place my fabric on top to cut out my back piece. So this is one, my front piece, and this is my back piece. Now I didn't start from the center point. I left about 2 inches to 1.5 to 2 inches for my zip and for my slit at the bottom part of my skirt. All right, so that's the only difference between my front and the back. I'm gonna have to cut it off. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be working on the bottom part. So to create my slit hole, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be marking from I place my tape at my waistline. Then I'm going to stop 2 inches below my new line. So my new line is 18 and 2 inches below it is 20 inches. So this is where my slit is going to stop. All right, so from this point now I'm going to be marking half an inch inwards from this center point, that's the center of my skirt. I'm going to mark in half an inch down to the bottom part of my skirt. This one's now marking half an inch, half an inch, half an inch. I'm going to do this until I get to the base or bottom of my skirt. So this is what I have. Then at this point now, I'm going to be making a curve to avoid that sharpness there. Alright, while joining my lining. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So this is what my slits will be looking like. So this is what I have. Then I'm going to open up my zip allowance proper. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be slitting. This is my pattern paper. Remember, this part is where we have our lace. So I'm going to be opening it up. So this is one we are going to be using to cut out our lace material. Point line, which is serving as my shoulder. So from here to here is my half length. All right, so at this point I'm going to insert my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches here. Then I'm going to mark 3 inches, which is my neck width. Then from my 8 inches, the shoulder line, I'm going to drop down to 1 inches for my shoulder slope. So from here now, I'll connect it to here. So this is what I have as my shoulder slope. Then the next thing I'm going to do is from this shoulder line now, I'm going to mark my armhole. What you do is divide your bust measurements by 6, add 1.5 inches, you get your own armhole measurements. So I have 7.5 inches for mine, which is here. So at this point now, I'm going to mark the same measurement I have on my shoulder line, which is 8 here. This is going to be my chest line. So I'll go ahead and make a stretch through. So this is my chest line. Now for my armhole curve, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my armhole measurement by 2 to get the midpoint. Then I'll come in by half an inch, connect it to my shoulder slope. Then divide your bust measurements by 4, whatever you have, you insert it here. So this is mine. I'm going to be creating my curve from here. So this is what I have as my armhole curve. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to insert my bust point from the shoulder line. 10 inches is my bust point. and 13 inches is my under bust. Then I'm going to make a rule. So now the next thing I'm going to mark now is my nipple to nipple measurements. I'm working with 4. I think my pattern paper is not on a stretch rule, so I'm going to be covering that. Sorry, I'm trying to place my pattern paper properly to avoid rishi. So this is what I have. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark 1 inch on this side of my, that's on my half length. I'm going to come in from my line to mark 1 inch. This is for my dart intake. Then on the outside I'm going to be marking 1.25 inches. I'm also going to do the same thing on my bust line, 1.25 here and 1 inch here. Let me label it. So this is my chest line C, this is my bust point, this is my under bust, and this is my half length. Alright, so this is what we have. Now I'm going to use a rule to connect these points together. So this is what I have. Now from this point I'm going to make a curve into my bust point. The same thing on this part too. I'm going to go ahead and make a curve. So this is what I have. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and divide my shoulder slope into 2. This is the center point of my shoulder slope. I'm going to connect it to my bust point. This is what I have. Having done this now, I'm going to determine my new chest line. So from my shoulder line, I'm going to be marking 6 inches. This varies. You can decide to use whatever you want. You can decide to use 7, 8. The choice is totally yours. But 6 inches is perfect for this. So that's what I'm working with. So this is my new chest line. So now the next thing I'm going to go ahead to do now is I'm going to be marking 0.75 inches on both sides, or you can decide to mark 1 inch on both sides, which is totally fine. So I'm working with 1 inch on both sides of my line. That is to tighten my over bust. Now I'm going to connect it to my bust points this way. This is what I have here. So having done this now, I'm going to, these points I removed here, I'm going to be adding it back to this line. I have 2 inches. I went ahead to add it back. Extend my line. Then I'm going to create a new armhole. So I've gone ahead to create my new armhole. So now at this point now, I'm going to measure what I have here. This at my chest line. I have 0.75 inches. I'm going to add it to my pattern paper here after my bust measurements. So the same thing on my waistline. I'm going to measure what I have. Insert my waist measurement, which is 7.5 inches, plus 2.5 inches I've removed here, or 2.25 inches I've removed here. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be adding extra seam allowance. You can decide to work with 2 inches, 2.5 inches. The choice is totally yours. So this is what I have. Then I'm going to connect them together. For those of us that may ask, the reason why I added these 2 inches here is because if you don't add it back to your seam allowance, it's going to affect it here, because this is where you remove this from. All right, it's going to shorten your bust, like your pattern paper or your bust here. So that's why it's being added back here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and cut this. So this is what I have. Then I'm going to slit it open. I'm going to cut out for my back piece now. All right, so this for my back piece. From here to here is my half length. So now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark 1.5 inches from the center line inwards. This is for my zip allowance. Then I'm going to connect it. Alright, so now, having done this, I'll go ahead and mark my shoulder line, which is 8 inches. Here. 1 inch down for shoulder slope. Then from here, I'm going to mark my 7.5, which is my chest line. So, now, divide my armhole into 2 to get the midpoint. Come in by 1/2 inch. Here. Alright, then on the shoulder line I'll mark 3 inches shoulder slope, connect it to my 1 inch here. This is for my shoulder slant. Then on the chest line I'll go ahead and insert my bust measurement. Then I'm going to make a curve to my 1/2 inch here, then to my 1 inch shoulder slope. Alright, having done this, I'll go ahead and insert my seam allowance here. Then coming to this point, I'm going to also go ahead and insert my waist measurement plus my seam allowance. Then I'm going to connect the two together. This is what I have. Now the next thing I'm going to do is from my shoulder line, I'm going to mark 6 inches. That is where my back chest line is also going to be starting from. So this is what. So the next thing I did, sorry, I think I did that off the camera. What I did was to, okay, so this is what we have here. Sorry, I did it off camera, so let me redo it. So from that 6 inches, which is the new chest line, I connected it to the zipper allowance at the chest line area. So this is what I have. Alright, I went ahead to open up my zip allowance and notch my zip allowance. Okay, so this is what I have for my back piece. My sketch piece, I've gone ahead to cut out my lace fabric. This is what I have. Alright, so the next thing I did now was to place my pattern paper on top of my fabric. I opened up my front piece, I placed it on top of it, then I went ahead and made a V, like a line. Remember, the lace is going to be by the side, so the center is going to be the ankara fabric. Then I'm going to top the lace here. So now this is my lace. I'll go ahead and place it on top. So I'm going to go ahead and gently, properly arrange it on top of my fabric. I'm done. This is what I have. I went ahead to secure it down using a pin to pin it down. Alright, now the next thing to do is I'm going to go ahead and run a top stitch on it. Reason is because this my lace is giving a vibe, like the mouth part is giving all this star design. So that's why I'm not folding it in. But if yours is not, you can go ahead and fold it in on top stitch. But mine is giving this vibe, so that's why I'm going to go ahead and run a top stitch on it. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Then I will turn it out with a lining. So guys, at this point I've gone ahead to turn out my skirt pieces with my lining, both the front and the back. So this is my back pieces now. So I'm placing it this way, and this is for the upper part of my back pieces which I have here. So the next thing I'm doing now is I'm going ahead to join the pieces together. After joining it together, I'll go ahead and mark my darts line and dart intake on it. So for my bustier, this is what I have. Alright, I've gone ahead to cut out my breast pad. I have a tutorial on how to cut breast pad, which I'll be dropping on the description box. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and join my breast pad together. Okay guys, so for the drape that is going to be in front, I have times 2 of my, from this point to my under bust, times 2 of it, or you can make it times 3 of it. So I have about 17 inches here. So now what I'm going to do is, because this we're going to attach it to our bustier line here, then it's going to be having a pleat this way, and it's going to go into our armhole. So this is what I'm trying to arrange it on my fabric. Having arranged it here, I'm going to go ahead and trim off this using my armhole. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin this down. So now having done this, I'll go ahead and turn it out with my lining. So guys, for the sleeve now, I'm going to be working with the length, about 15 inches length. That's what I'm going to be working with. So this for one sleeve is on a fold. Then for the width, I'm going to be working with 11 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch here. Then I will draw it this way, something like this, and attach it to the sleeve this way. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and cut out another piece this way, unfold. this is what I have. I'm going to go ahead and run a stitch on top. So guys, the next thing I'm going ahead to do now is to attach my sleeve to my so guys, when I'm done fixing the sleeve, I went ahead to shape my dress, fix my zip to my gown, and this is the final result. Thank you so much. See you in our next video. I'll also go ahead and join it to my front piece.